whether or not you're joining us from Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, or Africa. It's certainly great to have you all on board. We're expecting attendees from 35 different countries here with us today, so it's a truly global audience. And as the slide says, my name is Kieron Peacock, and I'm the Education Advisor to the Chairman, Sir Roger Fry, and the AoBSO Executive Board. And having looked at the list of attendees, I think I know, or I've worked with, or I've met around 50% of you, and I'm thrilled that this hasn't put you off attending, which is great. So lovely to see you all here today. Now, you are all aware that today's event is primarily an update on the state of play regarding BSO inspections, but also provides us with an opportunity to briefly update you on the International Education Strategy and IQTS, which you may or may not be aware of. But we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Not all of our attendees are BSO schools, 25 or so of those that registered are considering BSO membership, and some are already aspiring BSO schools. Of course, some might just be testing the waters, and that's also fine. However, clearly BSO is of interest to you, and you are all most welcome. We're also very aware that international schools exist in different settings and circumstances. Different local rules and regulations from the government, from ministries of education, and so on. Additionally, different British international school associations and their members manage and choose from a range of options regarding accreditation and inspection systems. And indeed, some associations have their own excellent processes and procedures. Choice is important. There is no one size fits all, and each school must choose what they think is the best fit for them. Talking of associations, at this stage, could I offer a warm welcome to our friends and colleagues and members of the executive boards of NABSS or NABS, the National Association of British Schools in Spain, the Latin American Head Conference, the Council of British International Schools, British Schools in the Middle East, and the Federation of British International Schools in Asia, who have kindly shared and promoted today's event to their membership. Thank you and welcome to all of you and their member schools. We're all working more collaboratively than ever as international associations and are developing some clear and shared priorities. Many of you will have seen the Joint Association letter on international examinations addressed to the Secretary of State for Education and forwarded to all relevant parties. We have most recently begun to collaborate on further improving safer recruitment procedures and strategies for the benefit of the whole British international school sector. This is work in progress and is intended to complement the excellent process and procedures already in place across the associations. As you will all be aware, the British Schools Overseas Inspection Scheme is a voluntary scheme for overseas schools and ensures that schools provide their pupils with the skills and qualifications they need to enter or re-enter the British education system. The BSO scheme also helps to inform parents about how the standards in these schools measure up against standards that apply to independent schools in England. Now, this may or may not be important to an international school, depending upon a myriad of factors. However, even if BSO is not mandatory for association membership or isn't currently your preference, it is currently the only DfE approved and monitored inspection process, and that obviously carries some weight for those schools wishing to compare themselves to the UK independent sector. As I said, for some associations, this may be mandatory, but for others, it's a choice, and for some, it may be a low priority, and that's all absolutely fine. At AoBSO, we obviously aim to support BSO and aspiring BSO schools, and through ever improving cross-association liaison collaboration, we are keen to find more ways of supporting British international schools in general. Indeed, growth in BSO is supported by the International Education Strategy, and I should talk a little bit about that shortly. I'm also delighted that we are joined today by representatives from the 3 DfE approved BSO inspectorates, and we'll be hearing from them all a little later on. They are Education Development Trust and Mike Hewlett. From ISI, we have Richard Johnson and James Woodhead. And from PENTA International, Mark Evans. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for giving up your time today. It is much appreciated. And we'll be going to their slides and Q&A a little bit later in the session. It's worthwhile updating you all that AoBSO and the 3 BSO inspectorates have since January been liaising and meeting regularly regarding the way forward for BSO and the betterment of British international schools. And we also look forward to meeting with the DfE next month, together with our International Association friends and partners, and we shall update you thereafter of any significant outcomes. So that sets the context for today's session. Let's have a look at the agenda. Now, the top two sections, as you can see, are very much BSO related. The middle two sections are the International Education Strategy and IQTS, and then we've got what will be perhaps the main part of the session, which is the updates from the BSO Inspectorates and the panel Q&A sessions. My colleague Mark Bignell is going to lead the first two items. So Mark, I'll hand over to you now.
Many thanks, Kieron. I'd also like to echo Kieron's welcome to you all. It's so good to see so many familiar names on the list with us today, and also to hear that we've got so many new friends and colleagues interested in BSO and joining to find out more. So over the next few minutes, I'll bring you up to date on how BSO's inspections have continued during the COVID period and how ourselves at AoBSO have supported the DfE and the BSO community of schools whose re-inspections haven't been able to take place because of the various travel restrictions around the world. So over the last 12 months, the AoBSO team have been working with colleagues at the DfE and all three BSO inspectorates on an almost daily basis to ensure that support has remained in place for both BSO and aspiring BSO schools. This has included supporting face-to-face inspections where travel restrictions and lockdowns have allowed them to take place. And I'm delighted to say that there have even been inspections taking place in the last week. And later on in the session, I'm sure the respective inspectorates will give examples of where they've been to visit, inspect and accredit schools during the last 12 months and their plans for the foreseeable future. With the postponement of a number of inspections, however, we've been working collaboratively to ensure that the backlog of inspections is kept to a minimum and managed in the interest of all parties, and this has included working with schools and inspectorates on scheduling of first-time BSO inspections and working with colleagues at the DfE on accreditation extensions for those BSO schools who were due for re-inspection in 2019, 2020 and 2021. These extensions have ensured that schools whose inspections have not been able to take place have retained their BSO accreditation until a time that face-to-face inspections can recommence en masse, and has supported inspectorates in ensuring a balance between first-time and re-inspection when looking at their diaries for the coming months. So Kieron and myself had the pleasure of meeting with Peter Swift, Sue Whitehouse and Rachel Gargett-Gillens from the DfE BSO team on the 26th of February, where a number of key issues relating to BSO schools and inspection were discussed. In this meeting, I'm delighted to say the DfE were able to confirm that any BSO schools who have not yet applied for extensions to their accreditation can continue to do so. So if you do have an inspection in a diary in the coming months that ends up being postponed, please do let us know and we will ensure that there's no break in your accreditation. As I've already mentioned, the DfE are keen for inspection to take place where it is safe to do so and where COVID restrictions allow. And as I said, I'm delighted that some inspections are able to take place, albeit I'm aware that's on a restricted basis at present and predominantly where inspection providers can avoid international travel and deploy local inspection teams. There are a small number of schools who have recruited NQTs for the 21-22 academic year who, because of COVID restrictions on inspection, may have less than the 2 years required remaining on their licence to support induction through the new ECF. In this scenario, the DfE have confirmed that they're keen for schools to make themselves known to AoBSO and the inspectorates, and we hope that we can look at prioritising their inspections as soon as physically able. It's key to stress, though, that there are no deadlines on the BSO extensions that the DfE are granting for schools at present due to the unknowns that continue around when we'll be able to return to universal international travel. There will be further guidance provided to inspectorates and associations in due course, and AoBSO, along with your membership associations, will ensure that affected schools are kept informed of the latest guidance as and when we receive it from the DfE and as we make the journey out of lockdown. As I've already mentioned, we have worked extensively in recent months to support accreditation extensions, and to date we have supported 57 BSO schools in applications to the DfE for extensions on accreditation. If your BSO accreditation is due to lapse in 2021 or before, and we've not yet heard from you, and you would like our support in ensuring continuity until a time that inspection can take place, please do drop myself a line via email to admin@aobso.uk or to Kieron on education@aobso.uk. And on that email, please send us a link to your most recent BSO report. We'll then make representation on your behalf to colleagues at the DfE and ensure that your extension is granted. This process from request to formal acknowledgement of extension usually takes around 2 weeks, and when granted, you'll receive confirmation in writing from the DfE that your accreditation will continue. It's important to stress that you do not need to be a member of AoBSO to draw on this support. As an association, we're keen to support all BSO schools with this, and I'm asked quite regularly if there's a charge. There's no charge for this support. It's just our commitment to supporting the sector. So that information we've covered to date is for those of you that already have BSO accreditation. But as Kieron said, we're joined today by a large cohort of prospective BSO schools. So I'm aware that as we've got a large number of schools considering BSO accreditation with us today, it's important to give information on the scheme, the benefits, and I'm often asked the question, why BSO? As Kieron mentioned, while there is no one-size-fits-all accreditation, BSO does offer a number of unique benefits to you and your school. There are several reasons for a school to submit itself to the rigorous BSO inspection system, and these, of course, vary from school to school. These benefits include predominantly UK government accreditation. BSO schools have the right to display the BSO inspected logo on websites and publications. The UK government gained worldwide legal protection of this logo, classifies it as a state emblem. Additionally, schools that have successfully undergone a BSO inspection can demonstrate to their parents and the school community that they have reached a certain standard and that this is similar to that of a UK independent school that has attained the same rating in an ISI inspection. Also, BSO is the only accreditation scheme that is independently monitored by Ofsted and delivered by independent licensed inspectorates. BSO schools are unique in that they are the only schools formally registered with the UK Department for Education as British Schools Overseas and are given a DfE GIAS, that's Get Information About Schools, number as part of their recognition of their status. This unique status afforded to BSO schools means that they, along with the small number of Ministry of Defence schools around the world, are the only international schools eligible to offer formal NQT induction in their schools, where the outcomes of induction are reported back to the DfE and induction completed with the TRA in exactly the same way as it would be in a UK maintained or independent school. With the significant interest we're seeing in international teaching for UK graduates, this opportunity is often central to the recruitment strategies of BSO schools around the world. And then finally, a BSO school principal has the opportunity to become a member of AoBSO and benefit from membership of the only DfE recognised association for international schools whose membership is solely made up of DfE accredited British Schools Overseas. So I'd now like to hand you back to Kieron, and Kieron's going to update you on the newly revised UK Government International Education Strategy, the IES, the role BSO will play in IES, and the DfE's ongoing consultation on international QTS, also known as IQTS. So back to you, Kieron.
Thanks, Mark, for that update. So I guess some key points to reinforce there. If you need an extension, then contact Mark at AoBSO and we can deal with that on your behalf. And if you've got any queries related to AoBSO or BSOs in general, we can get to those. In Whitty and Valentine, next slide, please. Yeah, I'm going to move through these fairly quickly because I'm very conscious of time and we need to get on to the BSO Inspectorates. But the IES was created in 2019, updated in 2021. It's a very cohesive whole government strategy supported by the DIT as well as the Department for Education, and looking at global opportunities. The IES outlines, the bottom bullet point says, the desire to strengthen the government's global Britain's agenda, and it's certainly gathering traction. I'm not expecting any of you to have read it, lock, stock and barrel, but it is worthwhile looking up, and we'll provide the link to that. And I think there will be opportunities in the international education sector, British school sector, as a result. Next slide, please, Mark. Yes, as you can see, the joint forward there from those two very important Secretaries of State. And perhaps even more importantly, Sir Steve Smith, who was the Vice Chancellor at the University of Exeter, has now been appointed the champion, the International Education Champion, and he's doing some great work to help add impetus to this. And if we go to the next slide, it's very, very clear, and I'll read this to you. He says, over the next few years, I will therefore be working closely with the sector, government colleagues and the UK's devolved administrations to showcase our first-in-class education offer to overseas partners, consumers and investors. I will work closely with overseas governments and officials to deepen government-to-government partnerships, helping to open new international opportunities for the sector and working to resolve market access barriers in priority markets. Now, that's a bold statement, but there's actually clear intent there to help develop British education internationally, to bring more international students back to the UK, to promote and develop services and supplies from the UK to the international community. And as I said, there will be opportunities as a result of that. I guess that's the gist of it. It's a cohesive, cross-department UK government initiative, which will, I think, provide benefits for us all in the international community. And it's something I felt you should be aware of. We'll circulate the link or Google the International Education Strategy after today's session and have a look at that. Next slide, please, Mark. And the IQTS consultation is a part of this process. Moving on, please. Yeah. On the 6th of February, the DfE launched a worldwide consultation on IQTS. Now, IQTS, International Qualified Teacher Status, is something that has been on the radar for a relatively short period of time, but it's gathering traction. There is a consultation with a date on the 3rd of May that you have the opportunity to reply to with your views that represent your own perspective. And it's not for everyone, I understand that, but IQTS certainly has got merits in certain parts of the world, international teachers to experience and benefit from quality evidence-based teacher training supplied from the UK, and will provide opportunities for ITT providers. But what it is and what it isn't, I think, is just worthwhile exploring very, very briefly, Mark. It is intended to, and you can read that as well as I can, a new qualification, international ITT course. It'll be delivered by accredited English ITT providers with flexibility and so on. It'll be based on English teacher training methods. So it's based on really solid foundations, and it will have some merits in the international context. Next slide, please. Yes, and it will directly lead to the award of it will not directly lead to the award of UK qualified teacher status. So this is something that needs to be considered. It may in the fullness of time. It will not currently be automatically accepted globally by Ministry of Education due to its distance learning delivery. Well, what does that mean? Well, in some parts of the world, distance learning is not yet fully ratified or accepted as a way of further education. So if you've got a qualification that was by distance learning, it may not be approved by the local government where you're working. So that creates some problems regarding its validity. But what people have said to us is, well, that may well be the case. My local area may not approve IQTS, but for someone who's looking at being an international educator, it may be a passport for them to go to top British international schools around the world because they've got IQTS, and to go to a school in a country where this has actually been accredited as a legitimate way of achieving some form of qualified teacher status. It doesn't automatically replace the procedures currently in situ, but that consultation is important. Express your views, and the links to that will be available at the end of the session, or there they are right now, 3rd of May. And if you would give us some sort of feedback on how you think that's shaping up. In other words, we think this is a great idea, look forward to seeing how it develops, or we think for these reasons it won't fly in our particular area, then we'd be curious to hear from you. The launch date is September 2022, so that's still a number of months away, 15, 16 months away. So there is time for you to express your own personal views, and also for that to be incorporated into the consultation. So the International Education Strategy and IQTS, both worthwhile being on your radar for the future. Okay, that's me done with my main bits now, and I'm really delighted that we've got our 3 inspectorate colleagues here to join us for our Q&A, and I'm going to introduce them one by one. They'll all tell us a little bit about their inspectorates and where they deliver and so on. So first of all, from Education Development Trust, I'd like to introduce you to Mike Hewlett. Mike, welcome, and over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks very much for that, Kieron. Thanks for that update. It's very, very helpful. Education Development Trust, we've been the approved inspectorate for the DfE since 2010, when BSOs were introduced. We're formerly known as CFBT, which some of you may know, where we inspected all the maintained schools in the north of England on behalf of Ofsted. That amounted to around 6,000 schools. As a not-for-profit organisation, we inspect and advise schools and governments all around the world. Most of our BSOs, though, are based in the UAE, in Dubai in particular, where we have a close working relationship with the KHDA, and in Asia. We usually inspect around 10 to 15 per year. It varies. The number actually was growing and will continue to grow, we anticipate, just prior to the pandemic. And like other providers, we're waiting for when we're able to pick up on all those schools that are waiting to be inspected. We have a core group of around 50 trained international school inspectors who are qualified, trained to work with us to either lead or to team on these BSO inspections. And we add to this group when we need particular expertise, experience for some of the schools that we work with. Actually, we've 3 inspectorates who all inspect against the same DfE standards, and I think that's an important point to make. We are licensed, authorised by the DfE to deliver these inspections, but we deliver them against the same standards, and all of our work is authorised by the DfE and also monitored by Ofsted. So there is that external quality assurance about what we do, which we feel is really important to stress to colleagues who are thinking about BSO inspections. It's increasingly being viewed as a flagship model when comparing British international schools against their UK counterparts. There's a clear picture, a clear definition of how effective those schools are against that benchmark of schools operating in the UK. And I would add, and I think it's credit to Kieron and the association, the cross-inspection inspector liaison has never been stronger. We're working very closely together because there is that shared interest and a shared desire to contribute to the growth of British schools overseas, which is clearly evident in this conference today. So thanks for that.
Thanks very much indeed, Mike. We're now going to hand over to Richard Johnson, supported by James Woodhead at ISI. So over to you, Richard.
Good morning, and thank you, Kieron. My name is Richard Johnson. I'm the work with ISI. I'm a Deputy Chief Inspector there, and I'm responsible for our international offering. So if we could just move on. So many of you would are familiar with ISI from your obviously links back to the UK. We inspect about 1,250, nearly 1,300 independent schools in the UK, which educate something in the region of 500,000 pupils. And I said many of you who work in the independent sector will be familiar with us. But what you may not be aware of is we also inspect and we support British curriculum schools in over 50 countries across the world. And we were in at the beginning, as Mike said, when the BSO process evolved in 2010, we were heavily involved at that point in developing the inspection scheme. Uniquely, because of our work in the UK, our BSO inspection framework reflects that leading UK independent schools. So that allows our BSO schools to make those direct comparisons. If you are familiar with the UK process, the UK schools have compliance-only inspections or full educational quality inspections. They mix and match, and many of our BSO schools do as well. Or, so there is that ability to tailor the type of inspection to what you're, seeking to gain as a school. But both types lead to BSO accreditation with the DfE. Our BSO lead inspectors, those are, we have a specialist pool. We have, because of our UK work, we have about over 1,000 inspectors on our books, but we have a specialist pool of 25 experienced reporting inspectors, because we recognise that, as I think Kieron and Mike drew out earlier, your schools, the international schools, are very unique. There are a lot of national contexts, and we are very keen that we only employ those most experienced inspectors. Our team inspectors are always, almost always currently serving as senior leaders at BSO schools, and the whole principle of peer review is very much embedded in our process. And, one of our principles is we always seek to, leave the schools in a better place, having had a strong dialogue with them. There's a very good saying that, effective inspection should be done with the school, not to a school. And we very much try to build that in as part of our inspection processes. So it remains a very positive experience for your schools. Thank you.
Richard, thanks very much indeed. And last but by no means least, Mark Evans at PENTA, over to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good to see you all. Many of you I know, many of you perhaps I will get to know. I'm delighted that whoever it was that found that photograph of me took one from when I was obviously about 12 years old. But just to say a little word about PENTA. PENTA's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. In fact, I was 5 years old when we set the company up, but we've been working with Ofsted pretty much without a break since then. So if we could have, thank you very much. So the point that I wanted to really emphasize, and it has been said a few times already, but I think it is perhaps the most important one, and that is for schools that are already BSO inspected and schools that are thinking about BSO inspection. BSO is the elite group of British schools overseas. It is an elite. It is not egalitarian. We do not aim to be inclusive. As Richard said, we apply the same standards. Of course, we take into context national differences, but the same standards are applied everywhere. When BSO was first set up in 2010, one of the directors at the Department for Education felt that we might in the end have 2,500 BSO schools. At that time, I was thinking 250. So I still have a £5 bet riding on that, even though the director has actually retired now, but I still have her email address, so she'll have to pay up sooner or later. I'm in a fortunate position in that I spend most of my life in the Middle East. So we've been somewhat fortunate in the sense that we've not been quite as restricted as UK-based inspectors have been. We, similarly to EDT and ISI, we have a large pool of inspectors. You may wonder why we have such a large pool. It's to give us the flexibility that we need, because BSO inspection, if you think about it, it's quite a seasonal process. There are not many schools that want to be inspected in September. There are a lot of schools that want to be inspected in usually between February and April, May. So we keep the pool as large and refreshed as we can. We're inspecting now. We have been inspecting all the way through. In the last 4 weeks, I've inspected in Spain, in Romania, in Slovenia, and in Dubai. We have to prioritise the safety of students, of course, the staff in the schools, and of our own inspectors. But we do adopt a very individualised approach. We have agreements with various ministries around the world that deems the BSO work to be essential. And therefore, despite COVID and Brexit, both of which have impact, we have been able to continue doing a certain number of inspections. We have, like my colleagues from the other two inspectorates, we have a number of schools that are waiting, but we're adopting a very individualised approach to that. We need to know that the country is open, that the schools are open, and so on. But just to go back to the beginning again, I liked the phrase flagship. I think the BSO group are flagship schools. Remember, they are Ofsted monitored. It's the only way to get a DfE number, the GIAS number, and also allows for NQT induction. So thank you very much, Kieron. That's the end of my little piece.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks to all three of you, Mark, Mike and Richard. If I could ask you all to come live again with your microphones on, and also Mark Bignell to join us as well, please. We'll go into Q&A, but just worth reiterating, I think what Mike said, that we are working very, very well together for the betterment of BSOs internationally, and I hope that came across to you all. Each has a slightly different USP, but each is supported by the DfE and ratified by the DfE and provides a quality inspection process. If I may, Mark Bignell, before you kick in with any questions that have come through the chat line, one for you, Mark, that came in from the British School of Sophia from Matthew Osborne, who's asked that they've arranged their BSO inspection that's taking place in a month or so's time. This is the second date that they've chosen due to lockdowns. Up until last week, schools were open. However, there has been a 2-week closure again. We hope to open again at the end of the month, but are now in a position that we have no idea when the next closure could be. What do we do if the government decides a few days before our inspection to close our school again? Mark, I think you're delivering that inspection. Could you feedback to Matthew?
Absolutely. Funnily enough, on my list here, Matthew's name appears, and he is about to receive an email saying, okay, what are we going to do? And I think it's the same for all three inspectorates. I'm not just talking about PENTA. We have no option but to be incredibly flexible. You know, we've had this before. I remember very well an inspection in Kuwait. The team was in place long before COVID. Team was in place in the hotel, ready to go, and a national holiday was announced for the next day. There's nothing that we can do about it except whatever the logical response is. So in a school that gets cancelled or shut at the last moment, and we know that can happen on a day's notice. You know, if you have notification from a family that there's a child who's been tested or the parent's been tested, we have no option, of course, but to cancel and postpone. I think our record so far is 5 separate postponements. And that was the inspection that happened this week, in fact. So this was the 5th date that we'd arranged with the school. So
thanks, Mark. I'm sure that's reassuring for Matthew. Flexibility remains the order of the day. That's clearly the case. And I know that'll be the case with each of the separate inspectorates as well. Just following on from that, so obviously each inspectorate's been busy supporting schools from a distance in most cases. Could I just ask Mike and Richard what your state of readiness is for a return to full-time inspection as and when that is allowed? Mike, can I come to you first?
Yeah, I mean, as Mark was saying before, we're ready to go. All our inspectors have been trained as required by the DfE, and we're in constant contact with the schools that were due or are due to be inspected. But obviously, we're dependent on travel restrictions within the host country, the arrangements in the host country, and as Mark said, we have schools one day all in, everything's fine. The next day they're closed. So we have to be flexible. And it's reassuring that the DfE are so flexible in terms of their commitment to extend the accreditation for as long as necessary. I think the work that's been done in that respect has been very beneficial. But certainly we're all geared up, ready to go. We have dates already penciled in, but they can change as they have done. And we've had serial cancellations with a number of schools who were keen to be inspected, but basically ready to go when we can.
Thanks. Richard?
I very much echo what Mike has said. We are absolutely teed up and ready to go. We have got a lot of inspections penciled in over autumn this year through into 2022. We're very much ready to deliver those. But I would stress, if as it's been said several times, your schools, the situations you're facing at the moment are very unique and really challenging. The DfE have signalled that they are going to be patient and supportive in this process. So please do not, it shouldn't be at the forefront of your mind at the moment, stressing over renewing your accreditation. You need to get your school in the right place. The DfE will, and I know AoBSO will support you in that. They will give you the time to get ready for that inspection. So don't feel there's a ticking clock out there at the moment.
That's great. Thank you. And I guess the key to all of this is open communication through AoBSO and through your scheduled inspectorates as needs be. Mark Bignell, if I could hand over to you now. I think you've got perhaps some questions that you can filter and pass on to the panel, please.
Yep, thank you, Kieron. So I'll run through them in order that they came into the pod and direct them as appropriate. So Simon O'Connor, could we have an email address to contact with issues in relation to support maintaining accreditation when unable to have an inspection? If you'd like to contact me, if you've got a current BSO accreditation and your re-inspection can't take place, if you contact myself on admin@aobso.uk, along with a link to your most recent BSO report, I'll then liaise on your behalf with colleagues at the DfE and ensure there's continuity in place. I'll then make your current inspectorate aware that the extension's been granted and keep everybody up to date on the status going forward. We've got one from Shania Nadine in Bahrain. So a question from Bahrain. From a school that was not able to attend this meeting, will the DfE recognise the IPGCE? Can someone do the IPGCE, then the IQTS? Kieron, do you want to pick that up or would you like me to?
No, you carry on, Mark. Very happy for you to.
Okay. So important to stress to everyone that the DfE do not award QTS to any form of PGCE completed overseas. There's a number of different acronyms used. There's an IPGCE, a PGCEI, a PGCE IDL, or sometimes it's just referred to as a PGCE. But the statutory rule is that if the placements on any PGCE program have not taken place in the UK and the program has not been studied in the UK, it does not award QTS. So if you're looking to gain UK qualified teacher status at present, the only route is the DfE's assessment only route to QTS internationally. As Kieron said, there is a possibility that IQTS may be part of a pathway to QTS internationally, but we're looking sort of 2 or 3 years down the road for that. So if at present you're looking to gain, you've got a teacher looking to gain QTS internationally, it is the AO route to QTS alone. And again, I'm happy to field sort of one-to-one conversations around ITT for you if you get in touch. One for Mark now from Jasmine Kang about your capacity for inspection in term 3 and your readiness for inspection at PENTA.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I was going to say before, I've not talked to Mike and to Richard and James about this directly, but when lockdown started, I became very nervous that the lockdown would stop, and therefore all the schools that had been postponed would be ringing up and saying, okay, can we go next week? So we'd have had 50 schools going for 1 week. That's clearly not going to happen. So it's very country dependent. We have a large capacity, but it's country dependent because we have to have the various factors in place. The airports need to be open. The schools need to have the children in, not learning virtually. And that a question that does come up every now and again, is it possible to do BSO inspection as a virtual process? I've not heard a DfE answer to this, but for PENTA, the answer is no. I think in terms of credibility with the parents, we need to have sort of boots on the ground.
Thanks, Mark. And Mike, the next one relates to an EDT scheduling. So if we take sort of your current capacity, your current plans for the rollout, and then we'll go to Richard for the same response. So we've got it from everybody.
Yeah, so I mean, our administration at the moment is based in Dubai. That's who look after all our BSO and ISQM work that we do. We're taking it on a school-by-school basis, but clearly we're guided by what's happening in country, both in, for example, UAE and also in the UK. And so what we're suggesting to our colleagues in the schools, we're in contact with them on a regular basis, updating them on what we think we are able to do at what particular time, and that will continue until we have a clearer picture of what's going to be possible. Like Mark, we're keen to support, we're keen to inspect as soon as we can, but it's got to be safe. It's got to be meeting the requirements of the schools that we're working with, and also the requirements of getting our inspectors there safely and returning home again. So a school-by-school basis, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. And within the UAE, particularly Dubai, where we do a number of inspections, we have our own officers there who are fielding these questions on a regular basis. So that's what I would suggest to anyone who's awaiting that inspection to continue to make those contacts.
And Richard?
Thank you. Again, we're in a very similar situation. Obviously, whilst our head office is London-based, a lot of our inspectors are spread regionally, and we would anticipate that various regions, depending on the COVID situation, would free up earlier than others. We do have a high capacity to catch up on BSO inspections, but as I said before, that, it's when the time is right, the DfE have signaled that they will be patient. The point's being raised about remote inspection in the same way that education delivery in schools across the world has changed dramatically over the last year. So it's inspection in a sense. At the current time in the UK, we are doing some remote inspection related work. It's actually very liberating because it means in some ways you can get the paperwork side of things done, the admin side, the policies, recruitment checks done before you go into the school. And then that means you can make much more effective use of the time in school. But as Mark said, there is ultimately during an inspection, there's no substitute for getting out on the ground, looking people in the eye, reading their body language, if you're talking about elements such as safeguarding and that aspect. So there will be, we're making extensive use of remote working for inspection, but there will always be that on-site element. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So Kieron, I'm conscious of time and the fact that a number of people have got another meeting at the top of the hour. We've had sort of questions around sharing of documents or recording after today. So just to let everyone know before I hand back to Kieron, later today we'll be emailing you a copy of the recording, a copy of the slide deck, links to the various DfE documentation that Kieron referenced, and also the contact information of Mark, Richard and Mike. So if you have an inspection scheduled with one of them and you've got particular questions around what in my scenario with the current situation in my country, I'd recommend dropping the gents a line directly after today. But everything will be shared with you by the end of today. So hopefully we've covered everything. And if you have any follow-up questions, you have our email addresses all on the screen, and they'll all be included in the follow-up.
Thanks, Mark, and big thank you to you all for participating today. We hope that you've taken away something that's of use, one or two useful bits of information that you might be able to refer back to. Could I just urge you all, if you are having difficulties getting information, so on, that each and every one of us involved at AoBSO or in the Inspectorates is very happy to receive your communication if you've got any queries, and if we can do a little bit of legwork for you and make your lives a little bit easier out in the international sector, then we're always happy to do so. Of course, there are certain things that we can't do, but where we can help, we're very happy to do so. A big thank you to Mike, to Mark and to Richard for participating today, and I know that we'll be meeting in the not too distant future to review the content of today's meeting, but also meeting with the DfE next month along with the associations to see where we are with BSOs and what might be happening in the future. And my last thank you goes to Mark Bignell, who's put all of this together today. Thank you from me to you for coordinating all of this, and we hope that everybody else has a most enjoyable day. If you are an AoBSO member, please do rejoin us at the top of the hour in 10 minutes or so for the AGM. We look forward to seeing you there. And that's it from us. Thank you very much indeed, and do keep in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.